everybody, and welcome back to another amazing episode. It is Dorothy, your favorite host with the Death in Cambodia, Life in America podcast. Today, I have a very, very incredible special two guests. I have been blessed with two today. We have Chantha Nguon, who was born in Cambodia, refugee of the Khmer Rouge, who shares her story through the newly released book, Slow Noodles. Today, she is the co-founder of the Stun Trang Women's Development Center, a social enterprise that offers living wage education, social services to women and their families in rural Cambodia. She is also a public speaker who has appeared at universities, news segments such as NPR Morning Edition. Through her book, she reclaims the recipes she tasted in her mother's kitchen and is able to find healing. We also are joined by her daughter, Clara Kim, who has helped this book come to life. Chantha and Clara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having us.
Hi. So, Chantha, welcome to the podcast. It's amazing that your book has come out within the last year. I think just flipping through it, anybody who can flip through this book can realize how different this book is from other books. Let's go back a little bit. Can you tell the listeners about kind of your childhood? What kind of child were you growing up?
Now living the life I am, I look at the first 9 years of my life, I considered it a normal life because after that, I didn't have a normal life. So my first 9 years, I went to school at 4 years old. We had breakfast in the morning, and then my mother gave me some pocket money and then came home at lunch. And after lunch, I had a short break and then went back to school for the afternoon. And on Sunday, we went to church, and after church, our family went out to some family's friends' farm, and we had picnic. And then after that, I attend church school. So for me, the 9th year, I was normal like every other child in the world. We had everything. I mean, food, clothes, schools, transportation. My father had a car, so that's that was my life for the first 9 years.
And you were 9 years old when the Khmer Rouge took over.
It was 1970. It's the coup d'etat. My father passed away in 1969 when I was 8 years old. And not long after that, because my mother was Vietnamese, so the coup d'etat, they targeted Vietnamese people. So that's why my mother was worried, and she sent my brothers in order to protect them to Vietnam. And I was the youngest, so I went with them. And my oldest sister supposed to be a mother to her sons. So my sister took my brothers and myself to Vietnam, and my mother stayed behind with one of my brothers to sell the house of our grandparents. But she joined us in Vietnam in 1975 with my brother. Pol Pot had took my brother.
So you had lost one brother to the Khmer Rouge, and then the other two went with you to Vietnam. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, the other two went, and then with my sister, and my mother sold the house of my grandparents.
Right.
Business was easy for everybody between the 1970 and until the Khmer Rouge time. So my mother stayed behind, but she sent money to my sister to buy the house for us, a very, very small house. And and flooded every time we had rain. But my younger brother of the two died very early after we arrived in Vietnam, like the second year. And then my oldest brother, the younger than my oldest sister, he also died in 1975, very, very early after the liberty of Saigon. And then my sister died about 14 months after that. So, yes.
Did you remember if you knew or had an idea of exactly what was going on? I mean, it's hard at 9 years old, but do you think you had kind of an idea of what was happening?
No, we went to that day. We came back from school, so we walked past the my friend's house. She's Vietnamese, and then her house was a bike shop. And then we walked past her house, and then pile of the bike from her shop was destroyed and out on the street. It was a shock, but when I came home, nothing happened to my family because we had the neighbors came in, and because it's a garage, a few cars inside. So the neighbors pushed the car out on the street, and then they didn't touch my house. But anyway, my mother again sent us, me and my sister, and my mother went to hide in the Chinese church near my school. And still, I had no idea why. And until I read the journal de Anne Frank, it reminds me of myself. Yeah,
Yes.
there's a similar age. And then in a very quiet way, we had to go in and out the room. And I didn't ask my sister because she just told me so. Yeah, don't go out the door. If you go down to the kitchen downstairs, you have to run very quickly. I never ask any question, but then I read until I read Anne Frank journal. Then I said, "This is me." Yeah, I can feel her.
Yes. Yeah, I can imagine that being shocking, this kind of similarities between Anne Frank and you and being the same age and her thoughts, and kind of probably similar thoughts to what you were thinking at that age. In 1975, at this point, you were in Vietnam. That is the day of
Yes.
liberation for Vietnam, but that is also the beginning of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. Was it safe in Vietnam, and how long did you stay there?
Yeah, because the war ended. We went there in 1970, and the war is still on between the
I
North
see.
and the South.
Mm-hmm.
And it is safe. It was safe where we live in Saigon, but on TV it's about war, and in the community it's about the funeral. We went like every day in our community. I went to the funeral like I never went to funeral that many in my life after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of the soldier.
How long did you stay in Vietnam for?
I left in 1984 after my mother passed away, so it's about more than 10 years. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
the first 5 years was war, and the second from 1975 was Hungary. Yeah,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
war ended, and the communists occupied Saigon, and everything just under even darker situation, and food became more and more scarce. Yeah, and we didn't have money. Nobody had money to buy anything. Then
Mm-hmm. What was the hardest memory of those years?
it was first I lost my brother, and the first brother was my favorite. He's very sweet. He never hit me. Yeah, but anyway, I was young, and I still have my bigger family. And then my second brother, he was like a star in the family, and he was gold and diamond. And then he became very, very look. very poor, not like the son of a rich family anymore. And then he died. And then my sister died. She is my second mother. And then finally my mother also left. So to talk about it, I better not to talk about it. It's not to think about it is better for me. Yeah, because every time I think about it, I cannot stop crying.
Sure.
It's many, many, many years ago, but still I remember, like, because it happened, it didn't go away. Yeah, it stayed in your life.
I think if it's one thing that I've learned from doing this podcast and interviewing my father, I've interviewed my father for over 50 episodes. It's really amazing and incredible how memories and especially trauma from that age can still live within you 50 years later. You know, my father himself can recall, if you put him in the right place, he can recall such details of exactly how he felt as if it was just happening. So no, I understand how painful and how hard it is to revisit these things.
Yeah.
So you stayed in Vietnam until after mom passed. And then where did you end up going?
It was like everybody tried to run away. Everybody in the South tried to run away from Vietnam. So it became like a boat people who, so we were one of them. But because I knew the way to come back to Cambodia and we can go to Thailand, that's how in our mind we can go back to Cambodia to go to Thailand into the refugee camps. So that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. So you went through Thailand, and which refugee camp?
We were moved every 4 years. I don't know why, but every 4 years. So through 10 years in the refugee camp, we changed 3 different camps. And we ended up in Site 2 by Cambodian border to be sent home.
Mm-hmm. And sent home, meaning were you looking, it wouldn't be back to Vietnam, but it would be somewhere else?
No, Cambodia. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
For the first election in 1993. So because we didn't see the future there for 10 years, we were living like in the holding camp in jail.
Right.
On the loudspeaker and the UN, we heard that Cambodia will have the first election, and the king Sihanouk wanted people to go back. So that's how we just resisted and be sent home. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
I know that.
home means on the street, not the home we went back to.
Right, right. No, I do know that in the later years, it was getting harder and harder to get out of these refugee camps. Many of the refugees in Cambodia just ended up staying, as similar to your story, because they never really had the opportunity to get transferred. So how old were you now at this point when you're getting released back home to Cambodia?
I was, it was 1993, so I was 32. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You ask me now, today?
Hard to recall. I know. It's pretty incredible then when you look back at your story and you realize anything past 9 years old up until your adulthood, essentially, you are moving around from country to country. Family members are being lost. Then now, getting transferred to a refugee camp for staying there for about 10 years. And then just at the end of all that, and having the hope of potentially going to another country, you just kind of are left back home on the street and with no home to go to. During this time, were you cooking at all? Starting to cook?
I started to cook when we were in Cambodia. So I did a job, and that's the first thing I took. Working in a restaurant, and it's It's not a really restaurant. It's a house. It's empty house after the war, and people just go there and set up some table, and that's my first job before I went to Thailand
Yeah,
in
I know.
1984. Yeah, and then on the way to Thailand, it's kokong, and I cooked in the Brazil, or I worked for a street food seller, and I cooked for her, and my cooking was becoming very, very popular among, because it's a whole village of Brazils, not just one or two. It's hundreds of workers working in those. She trusted me and she left me alone with everything from 4 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock in the evening. I was alone there and cooking and selling, and she just disappeared, and I gave her all the money I sold, and then the next morning 4 o'clock she just gave me the whole pile of raw meat and vegetable, and then I started cooking, and I don't know exactly how many months. I said I couldn't do that anymore because I don't have enough sleep, and I work too hard. My body ache. I couldn't get up at 4 in the morning every day, and so I was offered a job to cook, like to be a cook in the Brazil. Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, even at that point, were you cooking out of survival or did you cook because you kind of liked it as well?
I loved cooking since I was a child. The dish I cooked at those time, it was my mother's recipe. So like the
Mhm.
porridge with chopped pork, and because I love cooking, so I think that I remember the babo is really neat and not oily, and so they like it a lot. And also I cook the whole day is the Chinese noodle soup.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
at the Brazil, I just cook whatever daily the owner bought it, right? And then I just cook whatever she bought. Yeah.
Mhm. But you've always had a love for cooking. At that point, I'm sure with mom's passing, every time that you made a dish, it felt like you were closer to mom.
When it's too hard and you need to survive, you don't think about it that much. But the knowledge, the memory in you, like you know how to cook it, and you know how what make people like. So that's mostly for survival.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And more, I remember this is what my mother cooked for us. And this is exactly because my memory keeps all the taste in me. So yes, it's survival first because you need to work for food, and then you had a skill. At least you know how to cook something good that people like, and then you realize it's your mother's. Yeah.
Mhm. How long were you cooking and kind of jumping from these different jobs that required you to cook? How long were you doing that for?
I think it's no longer than 6 months, but I feel like forever because yeah, it just like we want to go out, but we didn't find the opportunity. And then I worked for another house again as a cleaner and cook, and then the pork ribs, and she said, "Oh, your pork rib is so good." And I said, "This is my mother's recipe. She cooked for us, and I remember, and I know how to make it." So yeah.
Hmm. So after this period, Chantao, did you stay in Cambodia or when did Clara come into the picture?
That's a long, many decades after that. So after I cooked in the Brazil, I went to Thailand for 10 years, and we came back. And we came back and we went to the jungle, hoping to find some gold to start a new life. And it didn't. So I came back in 1993 and went to the jungle and then came out. And then in 95, we got a job with Doctors Without Border. In 1996, that's when we decided now we have a job. We can build a family. And that's when Clara arrived.
And you met your husband around the time when you were released from the refugee camp and back in Cambodia?
No, he was my companion to run away from Cambodia to Thailand. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided we just stick together because we went through everything, so many things together. Yeah.
Right, right. So Clara arrives. And so, Clara, you were born in Cambodia.
Yes.
And what was your childhood like? Did you grow up in Cambodia? I know that right now you're currently based in London. Briefly, just how was that? How was your childhood, and how did it kind of, lead up to where you are today?
As the name suggests, of the nonprofit organization, it's based in Stang Train, which is the northern part of Cambodia, close to Laos border. Back when I was born, like growing up, it was, I think, one of the least developed parts of the country. There was still landmines all around when I was growing up. Ex-Khmer Rouge soldiers were living among us in the villages, and we know who they are. There are always stories. People were still talking about the Khmer Rouge as if it was still very fresh. And I think that was true because for a lot of people, they had, come back into the country in the 90s from the refugee camps, for example, or reunited with their family after. Because even though the war ended in 1979, the country was still in chaos. The Khmer Rouge soldiers were still everywhere in the 80s and even the early 90s. But I grew up in a very small village. I grew up with all the children in the villages and the nonprofit organization as well. And I think of it now as it's like its own little safe haven for a lot of the women and children, because there's like a kindergarten and there's always lunches, and I love the lunches there. And although I felt really guilty, like taking lunches from like all the like that could have gone to like another kid, but there was always plenty to go around. I was always looking forward to like the lunch and breakfast time for the kids. There were like the women would sit together and make lunch. Like there's like a health nutrition program for the women, so we offer them lunches so that even though they were making like good income, we can still ensure that they're getting the nutrition that they need, because they might be making more earnings than they would have otherwise, like either like working in the brothel or breaking rocks for very little a day or working in the garment factories. They now earn a livable wage. They can send their kids to school. They can take their kids to work. If they get sick, they can get their health checked. I remember like even some of the women, we sent them to the city, to the big hospital to get treatments. And so I grew up with pretty much the women. I call them aunties, like everyone was my auntie. So that was my childhood. There was always good food. My mom, there's always something big happening, and she would either have some of the women to come and we would have a big party and cook together. There was just always good food. Like I would go fishing with my dad and we would come back and my mom would grill them and make like a sour tamarind, like spicy garlicky sauce. And I think that's one of the recipes in the book as well. And then I moved to the city when I was about 11 years old, to the capital in Phnom Penh for high school, because I think like for my parents, they didn't have opportunities to go to school and finish, like go to university and get the education that they dreamt of. And so, and I think like with everything that they went through, they realized that education is the tool, is the key to survival. It doesn't matter what situation you're in, the way to get out is the knowledge that you have, because that's something that no one can take away from you. And so I think I spend my childhood and adulthood, just making sure that I earn this education and get the education, so I'm always prepared. So, and then I went, after I graduated high school in the capital, I went to the US and I got my undergrad from a university in the South. And then I worked for a couple years, and here I am in London. I came to London to get my master's, and I've been working for 1 year.
Chantha, you must be so proud. You must be so proud of Clara. Let's talk a little bit about how all this foundation led up to this amazing book called Slow Noodles. Chantha, did you ever know that you were going to write a book someday about mom's recipes?
Never. I never wanted to. Because first of all, the culture in Cambodia, we don't talk. Telling stories to the neighbor is like we lift the shirt for people to see our skin. And that's even forbidden for women. And also my story, it just eating me inside. And my children just saw me crying at any time, any meal. Because every meal we ate just remind me of something in my life. So they were very confused and they didn't know what to do to help me. And then I met one of the donors, Ann Walling in Tennessee. She reminded me of my grandmother who were very rich but very treated my mother like very bad because she was poor. And then Ann Walling just supported our organization like no questions. She, whenever I don't know where to turn to, where we had no more funding for the next year, I just email Ann Walling. She will send it to me. And so I came to respect her and love her. And she changed my mind about my grandmother. I had nothing valuable to pay to return the love she did for people in Cambodia. And she wanted me to tell the story, and I said no to her so many times before I said yes. So finally she introduced Kim Green. Kim Green was working for a female women's magazine. So it's all about women. And then Kim herself came to Cambodia and convinced me, because I don't believe anybody will listen to my story. Millions of refugees in the world. Every refugee is a story. So I said, no way. And she said, what about we write it as a recipe book to revive your mothers, and that's how I agreed. But I didn't know how hard it was to go through the whole thing to make the book happen. It took us 6 years to finish the book. Yeah, I had to live again. I have to face again everything I've been through. It is very, very hard. Yeah.
A lot of what you had just described is very, very similar to how I was trying to get my father to share his story, and how hard it was, and how most of the Khmer Rouge survivors out there are just deciding to, not talk about it. I think it's, as you mentioned, I think it's cultural, but I think it's also very rare for you as well, Chantha, because as a woman, you have certain expectations in Cambodia. I know you mentioned about the Chapsare and the book of women's rules, and there's a way you act and there's a way you speak. And the culture is very, very harsh on our women, I believe. And it's very, very hard to go through it. My father, interviewing him, sometimes he just didn't want to be in the recording room. It was like he was reliving it. What was your process like in getting these memories out and how many times did you feel like you had to stop or you couldn't do it anymore?
I think throughout 6 years, I didn't tell Kim the story, but I throw my anger at her because she's sitting in front of me. She asked the question, and for me, I looked at her like she caused me the pain I have to go through right now with her. So sometimes I just say I can't do this anymore, and I just left. Yeah. It's
It's hard.
it is really really hard. But anyway, after we finished the story, I said I'm done with it, and it took him 6 more years to get it published. Yeah, so she's such a hardworking person and never give up. And then every time the book get some editing to go on, and the question came back, and so I've been another 6 years with her to go back and forth. But anyway, by the end of it, I feel like I lifted up off my chest.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't bury the landmine inside me anymore, but I lifted. I feel easier to answer the question now
Yeah.
than when I worked with Kim. Yeah.
And Clara, what were your thoughts and feelings around mom kind of going through this process?
It was very difficult because I think the initial part of the project, I was still living at home. I was in my last few years of high school, and I could see how difficult it was for my mom. Like she was going through a lot at the time. She was always crying, and I remember, she would lock herself in for days, just answering the questions and then processing all the emotions that come with it as well. But I think after the book was done, like once it was published, and I felt like it was part of the healing process and almost like therapy for her to be able to write all of these feelings and emotions down helps release some of that trauma. And it's a way to, I think for her, like she was always afraid of losing everything over again, and it can happen at any point in time. And I think that working through this project has helped her realize that, that is not the case. And I can see like her healing journey in the last 10 years. Like now she's able to like find joy in the little things in life and for the future that she wasn't able to in the past. She finds so much joy talking about food and her like the good memories that she had with her mother and her sister. And so I think the fact that the book is told from a memory of food during good and bad times has helped her in a way. It allows her to be able to talk about it without feeling so much pain. And I feel like the book is also like a gift and my family's legacy for me, because now I have all these stories and all these recipes, even though I never met like my grandparents or my aunts. I feel like I know them through the stories and through the food that I eat. I can imagine myself, tasting their food, even though I've never met them and I've never tasted their food. It just feels like that's what it's supposed to feel like. It's supposed to taste like.
Yeah. How much of your mom's story did you know prior to the book coming out?
I knew a lot of the stories, not in the chronological order that the book has. And I think it makes sense because most of the stories that I hear are usually while we're eating or cooking together. And so, if my mom is in the mood for a fish story, she'll tell me a fish story. So I think the book kind of helped put things in order. Like I now remember, oh, okay, this story is in this period of time. The parts that I don't know are probably the darkest hours and days in her life. And I think that was not something that she probably wanted to share with me, or it was just too painful to say it out loud. But I think the most surprising parts of all was just hearing about like my father's story, because unlike my mom, he never talks about himself or what happened in the past. And I think, if you grow up with parents or grandparents who have gone through like something tragic like this, you either have someone who always constantly want to talk about it and share their experiences, or someone who just wants to keep it locked away and never want to talk about it. And so I think I kind of had both experience, like with my mom and with my dad. So I got to learn a lot about him and what it was like, obviously from my mom's perspective, but I really enjoyed reading that part of the book.
Yeah, I can find a lot of similarities between kind of your experience of hearing your parents' story and also my own. My dad really only gave me snippets here and there. And, the moment that he starts talking about something deep and dark, he just would pull himself back to reality. Chantha, I'm sure you're more than familiar with that feeling, but it was like I only got kind of snippets, and it wasn't until I got to sit down with him and got the full story, Chantha, you with sharing it fully with Kim, there were some parts that a lot of parts I had no idea about. I think that process not only is healing for the refugee themselves, but also healing for us too, a second generation who grew up with kind of holes in our history, not really knowing the full story. So yeah, do you feel like that was healing for you, hearing your mom's story completely?
Yeah, I think it definitely helped made our relationship stronger as well. And, I think it comes with getting older as well. I think when you're a child and you have parents who have PTSD, and it's really difficult to understand where they're coming from, especially when they're, like you said, they're missing pieces. And I think as you get older, you understand how difficult it is to go through something so awful and so traumatic, and to come out of it, a really good person and being able to take care of other people and caring for other people. And so, I gained a much deeper understanding of her trauma. And also, I have come to acknowledge that I will never be able to understand where the pain is coming from. And I think that's such a big realization, because I think as a child, I really wanted to understand why she was always in so much pain. And I think it helps, like, reading those stories, but also just acknowledging that I'm so lucky and grateful that I never had to experience anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Chantha, when you were choosing the recipes to highlight, because I'm sure there's so many more than what you chose in the book, but how did you go about choosing the specific memories that went along with the recipes?
I think I have to give credit to Kim, because I want to put everything down in the book, hundreds of it. I want to show everyone how good my mother was, but also because of the content of the book, and the publisher, they also have some requirement. And Kim chose the story to fit in. I mean, she chose the dish to match with the story, and that's how it ended up like that. Yeah.
Would you say that the recipes that were chosen are kind of the most important ones? Are we missing a recipe in there, or you feel like what was chosen really reflects the most important points in your life?
I think Kim has done a great job to show the most important thing in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and to find the dishes that comes at the time when it happened. I think yes, that's enough. It's
It covers it all.
enough recipes for the book. Yes.
What is the hardest recipe to make in terms of bringing in the most difficult memory? The one recipe that you make that always triggers the strongest memory in you?
I mean, every dish I cook, it reminds me of my mother and my sister. That's why Clara went through her childhood looking at me crying or laughing every time, every dish. I miss my mother most when we were poor, because when the good dish, I remember her like a queen in the kitchen, and then the fish, very bad smell that we had to marinate it with lemongrass. I feel sorry for my mother that she had to go through poverty with us, that she lost everything herself, and she lost. She was a good cook. She liked good food, but now she didn't have it anymore, and that's the most difficult for me about her. Yeah.
So the recipes that you ate when the family was poor are the ones that triggers it the most.
Yeah, that made me feel like I wish I could do anything at all to help her to have good food all the time, but I couldn't. So also the memory stayed. I regret. I wish I could do better, but I had no choice, and that's stay with me for the rest of my life. Yeah.
You wish you can do better in terms of what?
In terms of like, if we wish we have a better fish, then we don't eat the
Yeah,
very very bad fish. We grown up, we don't eat rotten fish,
right,
but then we had no choice. We had to
right,
make it edible.
right.
And the people I feel sorry for is not myself, but my mother.
Yes. It's almost counteractive. You would think that anybody would go through the recipes and they'd think that it's the fanciest recipe that reminds you of the most powerful time, but actually it is truly the probably the simplest recipes, the ones that you throw together when ingredients are scarce, that kind of triggers the true depth of the trauma. So you have this amazing book out,
Yes.
Chantha. At this point, I just want to say that I am so impressed by the way you're able to answer these questions, because I think it shows how much you were able to heal, similar to what Clara had mentioned. But I did this very same thing with my father, and it's amazing how after you do the hard work and you get the story out on paper or on audio, you almost come out of it like a different person. My dad told me probably towards the end of my recordings with him, he said that he no longer really has nightmares. And I thought it was so powerful because I think you and I both know that there is this really incredible power to storytelling, this really incredible healing power. I wonder if through this process, Chantha, you noticed certain things in you that signify that you have healed a good amount through this experience.
Yes, exactly. And it's a therapy. Yes. Because while working on the book, I needed help from a specialist. Yeah, I went to
Mm-hmm.
see a therapy, and he said the only thing he wanted me to do is to tell the story or write it down. That's the only therapy he could see I could help me, and it was very very true. And I would like to tell other people who went through the same, through pain, through trauma. It is really hard, very, very hard to start, to tell. But once you go in, you started it, and then you will come out a new person, like you said. Yeah, it's 100% helpful, useful, and it gives you, at least you look at life, it's not dead anymore. Yeah, because before that, it's dead. I don't know what to live for because my life ended long ago. Yeah, that's a feeling of people like us. But now at least I feel like I want to live longer to see my children, how successful they are, how far they can go. That's the very, very new to me. Yeah,
These sorts of feelings really only came out after you got the story out.
exactly. Only after, because like Clara said, I was in so much pain and cry all the time. Yeah, I don't see why I have to leave. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Claire, I'm sure you've noticed, as you mentioned, you noticed that change as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
She's much happier. I think she's able to find joy in life on her own, because I think when I was younger, her sole purpose in life was for us. And, she was just living in so much pain on her own, while also having to take care of us and making sure that we have the best of everything that she could possibly give. But now I can see that she finds joy in her own life and the things that she likes and she enjoys to do. And, that she looks forward to the future and things that she can do in the future that doesn't always necessarily involve, just taking care of her children and other people, like the women in the organization, for example. I'm just so glad that this journey has given that to her.
Mm-hmm. And Chantha too, probably now when you cook, you don't feel that sadness anymore when you cook these recipes.
No, yeah, you are right. I mean, I can breathe normal now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the stories are still there, because even though I'm in London, she might be cooking something and she'll text me and she'll tell me, oh, this reminds me of like when we were in Vietnam and we would order a bowl of bông bò Huế and we cannot afford it. So we would put rice in it, like she and her sister. And so, it is still there. But I think the majority of the time it's not just pain. Sometimes it was, a painful story of a dark time, but she can tell it. I think there's almost a dissociation to the pain. It's still there. I think the pain will always be there, but I think the number of times that the story comes out as painful has reduced a lot. And I think she can just look at it as memory and not just pain.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's incredible for anybody who, all the listeners out there, this book is just so different. As we had mentioned, it goes memory leading up to a recipe, and then you actually share the recipe with the readers. And it's incredible that people even out there who buy this book, you not only get a history book, but you get a memoir, but you also get kind of a cookbook as well. I think this is just very, very unique, one of its kind. What are the next steps and the next goals now that the book is out, Chantha? What's coming up for you?
I'm living in Cambodia and we have many foreigners here because my friends helped me to organize the book launch. And since Slow Noodles is the best sellers in the bookstore here, and then I got people who I never met, and they told me about reading the books and choose it for the book club. So they wanted to cook with me. So in November, I will have a group of 10 people, and they wanted to cook with me like we did in Nashville with Kim and
Mm-hmm.
Clara. Yeah, so that makes me very, very happy and proud that
Mm-hmm.
people look at the dishes and they wanted to learn. And they said the book has changed the dignity of Cambodia, because what they learn now, what they live in Cambodia is the new people, and they don't know the culture, the roots of Cambodia until they read the book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's my happiness, cooking with people.
Yes. Well, I appreciate having the both of you on here. I think many of our listeners are going to be able to listen to this and truly feel like they got the real backstory behind this amazing book. Clara, did you have any last words as well before we kind of closed out?
Not necessarily. I think readers will find some of the recipes a little bit surprising, because there are a lot of recipes in the book that are actual recipes, but then there are very much like a poetic way of telling a story too, through recipes, like recipe of rebuilding a lost civilization that doesn't involve, like actual food ingredients. So I do hope that people will try and read the book, or even try and go out and support a local Cambodian business, or try Cambodian food, or learn more about our history that goes beyond the Khmer Rouge. I think that's what we wanted out of this whole project as well. It's sharing stories about my family, but also just about our country and how proud we are of our food and culture and history as well.
Yes. And for those listeners, where can we find the book and learn more information about your mom?
Yeah, the book is available anywhere. You can buy books at your local bookstore or online. There are also like audio book version as well that I narrated. You can also find more information about Slow Noodles on slownoodles.com. We also have a YouTube channel that there are like videos of recipes that we've made as well. So, and blog posts about just stories about food in general, and our experience, like for me as well, like my personal experience and what it's like growing up in Cambodia. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Akun Chran, Chantha, and Clara. It was wonderful interviewing you guys. And as I said, all listeners, if you're looking for a unique book to check out, this is definitely one of them that has to be on your list. Thank you so much.
Akun Chran.
Akun Chran.
Thank you. All the best to you.
Thank you.